What's the most terrifying thing you've seen in real life? I saw a car crash as a child. My dad stopped the car to go help. He made me stay in the car, but I saw one body on the ground that started to gain a puddle of blood around it and another body handing out a window of one of the cars involved in the accident. Blood, glass, and car chunks were everywhere. Horns were honking, heard a lot of screaming. My dad came walking back to the car shortly after he got out. I asked what happened, he said there was nothing he could do, pulled into a parking lot and waited for cops to come. I remember being impressed by how fast the firefighters cleaned everything up. You would think seeing the bodies would stick with me, but what stuck with me was the pale dead look on my dad when he came back to me. Sometimes your best intentions can't do anything, and I could tell it got to him. I saw a 5-year-old girl fall about 30 feet from a chairlift while skiing. When she landed I was about 15 feet away. She landed on her stomach. I called ski patrol immediately, but the time it took them to get there felt like an eternity. It was probably not more than 5 minutes. I had no medical training other than very basic do not move the injured person. Since her face was directly in the snow, I took my jacket off and I held her neck head still and had a nearby person slide my jacket under her face. It was shortly after Christmas, so I tried to distract her by asking her what she got from Santa, and I sang her favorite Christmas song. I kept holding her neck still until ski patrol took over and sent her in the ambulance. Later, I found out that although she had some bad bruising, she walked out of the ER later that day. My mother giving my brother CPR on the beach after he broke his neck and almost drowned. He was in the water for about 4 minutes. Then watching the helicopter take him away not knowing if he was dead or alive. He defied the odds and went on to live another 36 productive years as a quadriplegic. I was with him when he died a few years ago. Damn, we had some good times. Edit to answer a few questions. He was body surfing at Rehoboth Beach in 1980. There was a major storm hurricane some miles offshore which can cause waves to carry one further and break on the shore. He was basically pounded into the sand head first. He went on to graduate high school, college, and some law school. Eventually went into social work advocacy. Was able to work till about 40. Lived till 52. He broke the same vertebrae as Christopher Reeves, but was able to breathe on his own. Dr. S told us not to expect him to live past his 20s. When I was 17, I still lived at my mom's house. We were in a middle-class neighborhood, so it wasn't necessarily a bad area for the most part. I was taking out the garbage one night as the sun had just gone down. I walked the first garbage can out and these two men were arguing across the street. I walked back and got the second one. When I turned around, one of the men lifted a gun and shot the other in the head point blank. The man with the gun stared directly at me, then turned and fled. I was surprisingly calm about it until I was on the phone to the police, then suddenly I started freaking out and panicking. As far as I know, they never caught the guy. Second plane hit the WTC out my 35th floor office window about half-mile away. The first one happened behind me and I guess I didn't hear it, but then someone called me and I was looking out the window at the smoke and the papers floating everywhere. I still thought it was some small plane accident and I couldn't see the hole because it was on the other side. I was wondering if it was caught on video and picturing what the crash would look like in my head when the second one hit right in front of me, on the side facing me. It slid in like a coin into a slot and after a moment a ball of flame shot out in various directions and a moment after that my window shook. It looked just like I was picturing the first one in my head at that moment and my mental gears turned for a full 10 seconds, wondering how my eyes just showed me what I was picturing. It wasn't until someone ran into my office asking what happened and I heard myself tell them that I realized it. I walked down 35 flights, walked miles home to Brooklyn, watched the second one fall on TV, then found my wife and toddler daughter at a gym class and immersed myself in my daughter's world where this didn't happen. We pulled up beside a captain in the army who was covered in blood. He was shaking and asking if we would help him because everyone in the Humvee was dead except him. They were working with Iraqi army and hit an Eid while doing a movement. We explained to him we specifically came out there to help him and he just wouldn't stop thanking us. It was obvious he was in complete and utter shock. He was the only survivor in that truck. I worked at a gas station when I was 18. One night, at the end of my shift, the graveyard guy just didn't show up. I called my sister to see if she would hang out with me until I could get a hold of someone. At about 4 a.m., an ambulance slowed down right in front of the station. As it came to a stop at the light, the back doors opened up and a guy jumped out. One paramedic hopped out of the back, chasing after him. The guy ran right up to the station, looking terrified. He turned to the left to run again, and we noticed that his head was missing a big chunk in the back, blood all down him. Medic continued to pursue him through the parking lot next door. We called 911 and explained the situation. Dispatch responded, "Yeah right." About 20 minutes later, police arrived to take a statement from us. Guy was high and injured, trying to get away. I don't know if they ever caught up with him again. I once tossed my little brother into the pool and his head came within an inch of the concrete edge. I knew as soon as he left my grip that I put too much force into it and time slowed down as he drifted through the air. With the angle he was falling, the speed he was thrown, and the height he reached at the peak of his trajectory, I knew if his head connected, brain damage would be the best case scenario. It was over in a half-second real time, and everyone carried on playing around. Had to sit down and take a breath. I love my siblings. I live in northern BC, Canada, and I was going for a run through some rural roads around my house. I turned a corner and immediately ran into a moose, with her calf behind her. NOW for anyone who doesn't know, moose are actually fucking huge and not scared of humans. They will stomp you to death just because they feel like it, let alone when they are actually protecting their young. In this case, I was literally less than 10 feet away from it. I was lucky in that it just stood its ground and glared at me, never breaking eye contact. So I was able to back away slowly and cut my run short and go home. If I took one step closer, there is a very real chance it could have attacked, and I probably wouldn't be here today. Came from seeing a movie at the mall with my 2 teenage sons. We had arrived separately and parked our cars in different sections of the lot. After leaving the movie, I was driving up a ramp and saw peripherally my son's car with the front end smashed in and smoke coming from the front. I quickly U-turned, and as I drove towards them, I could see my older son, the driver, 17 years old, standing outside of the passenger door with my younger son, his brother 14 years old, in his arms. The passenger airbag had deployed, so the 14 years old had a nasty scrape on his face from it, but thankfully they were both okay. I hope I never feel fear like that again, ever. Worked as a healthcare security officer in a rather large locked psychiatric ward. One day I was leaving dispatch and happened to catch on our old black and white monitor a man sitting in the middle of the main floor. Something struck me as wrong. Suddenly I saw a black puddle beginning to form under the man. I go running up to the unit and there sat a man in a puddle of blood. I called for backup, but he stood up and ran at me. I fought this guy for about 5 minutes, both of us covered in blood. His eyes were dead, like a shark's. Turns out he had sat in the floor and ripped out the stitches the had put in after his suicide attempt. Catching a meathed out young woman rummaging through tools in my dad's garage. The face she gave me when she realized a larger male had confronted her in a confined space was one of pure terror, and she was ready to claw my eyes out to survive what she most likely perceived as a threat. When she turned to run out of the garage, my police officer dad caught her by the arm and held her down until the police arrived. Watching her fight, beg, and plead that we wouldn't rape her or kidnap her was pretty heartbreaking when we had the best intentions in mind of getting professionals to handle her drug-infused meltdown. The struggle was strong enough that we decided we should handcuff her to keep her from hurting herself or us. Come to find out later, she was on the run and being chased by police because she thought she was being chased and in danger of being kidnapped inside of a hotel. We were her worst nightmare in her mind, and it sure as hell looked like it. When I was younger, I kicked a ball over the fence of my dad's friend's house, and naturally I stepped on the fence and poked my head over to see how far it had gone. I saw a man a decent distance away in the backyard, so I called out asking if he could pass my ball back over, but he wasn't responding, so I asked my sister if I was seeing it right. She looked and thought it was a scarecrow. I went to tell my dad and his friend, and they looked at it and called out, but still nothing. They jumped the fence to check it out, and it turned out I was calling out to a man who had hung himself to pass my ball back over. Few cops etc. came. That's about all there is to the story. It wasn't really scary, just creepy. I was pretty young, but it didn't really get to me or anything. I do remember it pretty decently though. I was maybe around 10 or so, and I was being driven to the doctor's office for a checkup when we stopped at a stoplight. There was a guy crossing the street to my left who looked down the road and started running across the crosswalk. Next thing I knew, a car drove through the light and slammed into him, launching him straight in the air, whereby he landed on the ground with a loud thud. Looking at him, there was no movement whatsoever. He was just lying there inert on the road. Luckily we were just down the road from a hospital, and there was a cop right across the street. We drove off from the scene with the woman who hit him in absolute hysterics. A hand grenade flying through the passenger side window of my Humvee. Was already on edge to begin with. That was definitely the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Second most terrifying thing was the aftermath of said grenade. Lost a hand, broke both legs, missing part of my foot. Guess what? I didn't lose consciousness. After seeing my hand missing and my feet and legs pretty much mangled, I definitely struggled to stay with it. I remember how either my brain or body or something made me feel like dying was okay. It was kind of a dreamy, peaceful feeling that scared me. Video of myself blackout drunk. The me that everyone knew was gone. I was gone. Yet my body was standing and talking. But it wasn't me, and I don't remember any of it. It was okay for a while, and then a switch flipped. Blackout me got mad. Really mad. It seemed as if I'd trash anyone at any second. My wife though, without a shred of fear of this zombie monster version of her husband, walks up and grabs my hand and walks me away like I was a child. Watching that tape, it looked honestly like I was seconds away from killing someone. I believe my wife knew that she was safe with me even in that state. I never want to do that again. Was taking my dog, Yellow Lab, for a walk with my dad when I was maybe 8 years old. We just started to head back to the house, and about halfway there a bear appears in the middle of the street. The bear was standing on its hind legs, standing about 12 feet tall, looking angry as all hell. My dad put me behind his back upon noticing the cub on the side of the road because he knew this bear wasn't fucking around if it thought its cub was in danger. Next thing I knew, my dog charged at the bear full speed and tackled it down the hill off the side of the road, and me and my dad both thought that was the end of our dog until about a minute later we see our dog strolling up the hill without a scratch on her. She wrestled a bear all the way down the hill and won, and most likely saved mine and my dad's life. My friend had an aneurysm while taking a leak. He had just smoked weed and his wife ran to my house next door to get my and my other friend's help. She refused to call the cops because the house smelled like pot. I found him pants down on the bathroom floor and screamed at her that she needed to call 911 now. So, my friend and I dragged him out of the bathroom, shoved some ice down his pants, and I began CPR. First responders in order. EMT, cops, FD. He wouldn't wake up, but he still had a pulse. I was hopeful. Found out only a bit later it was an aneurysm and he was brain dead when I was giving him CPR, and for months after, his wife kept him on life support and prayed and prayed. They finally took him off, but I heard third or fourth hand because I had transferred to university elsewhere. Halloween night 2004. When I was about 10 I saw a man fall from a ladder and die. In Cincinnati, some of the hills are ridiculously steep and the buildings are tall to accommodate. The man had to be up 4 stories or more. I was young. My half-sister was driving, she's 13 years older than me, and she was crying her eyes out. I didn't really understand what I had seen. He was up in the ladder, there was a flash I later learned was him hitting a wire, and that's why his ladder shot out and he landed in the street. Not sure if being electrocuted killed him or the fall.